Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is an issue of language and the use and abuse of words like anti-Semite and Nazi. Every anti-Semite is not a Nazi, and everyone who disagrees with me is not an anti-Semite. There are plenty of anti-Semites out there, real anti-Semites, and the worst of them fall into a category of those who believe that the solution to the problems besetting the world is the annihilation of the Jews. Hitler did not invent anti-Semitism. There were anti-Semites before Hitler. He just took it to a new level, a level unprecedented in human history. Throwing around the word Nazi as a name for people you disagree with, even vehemently disagree with, is an abuse of the Holocaust. It is an affront to all those who were murdered. The people who shout these insults debase the meaning and the history of the Holocaust. Misusing these terms and batting them around as common insults is an absolute form of abuse. It is a violation of historical accuracy, and it is a denial of the enormity of the massive catastrophe called the Holocaust. The Nazis plotted and put into place a plan to murder every single Jew, first in Europe and then throughout the world. Yes, there were other victims, but the Nazi murder machine was created for Jews and Jews alone. The other victims, even when imprisoned inside camps, were not the primary target of the Nazis. Hitler's Germany was a unique historical phenomenon. It was of hatred and of action. It was the first time in history that machines were crafted, invented, and perfected to the highest level of efficiency in order to produce mass murder. Until Hitler rose to power, and even now, weapons were created to hunt and to kill for food, or to defend against enemies and to protect. According to their inventors, even the nuclear and hydrogen bombs were designed to defeat an enemy, not to murder civilians. Of course, civilians did die, and of course, there are and have been massacres. But the weapons used in those situations were in the hands of murderers who abused their weapons when they used them to murder innocents. In the case of the Nazis, the entire raison d'etre of the death process was the final solution, which was ultimately to murder innocent Jews. Factories of death were planned and built. These factories were run by the elite SS military. Their existence had no bearing on the war effort. Their sole purpose was to murder Jews as efficiently as possible. Murdering Jews was so important to Hitler and the Nazi mission that even when the tide of the war shifted, and it was clear that the Nazis were losing, the Nazis did not slow down their murder process. Actually, they increased the flow of resources going to the factories of murder and stepped up the speed with which they could kill at the death camps. The word anti-Semite was coined in the 1870s by a man named Wilhelm Marr, a known racist. He created the term by basing it on the name Shem, the son of Noah, who became the progenitor of the Jews. It was not his classification. Rather, he chose the word based on the science of language that was evolving at the time. Etymology and philology became important sciences of language. These language scientists classified the languages of the Middle East as part of the Semitic language group. These were languages written from right to left and based on three-letter roots. Marr picked up on the term Semitic and called himself an anti-Semite, and his movement anti-Semitism. He was proud of his new movement and went to great lengths to create a huge distance between his creation and traditional Jew hatred of the past. Marr's anti-Semitism was a pure science. It was based not on medieval notions of the Jew, but on the science of superiority and of eugenics. This was a period of the advent of the philosophy of racism and chauvinism, deeply entrenched in the love of nation. Marr was one of its founders. Now, fast forward to today. Each time we use words like Nazi or call someone a Hitler, we reduce the enormity of Hitler's destruction and the Nazi evil. Regardless of whatever one might think, or how strongly one might disagree with someone else, calling them a Nazi is taking it too far, way too far. Nazism is not what we have. I've looked at the Breitbart site and looked again and again. Breitbart is not what all those people have labeled it. Okay, some of the feedback and talkback sections and comments are way off the charts and irrational. But that happens in the feedback sections in most mainstream websites. So skip over it. I do. I tend not to read crazy comments, preferring positive dialogue interactions and critique given with respect to the hot-headed verbiage. Showing a lack of respect hardly makes someone a Nazi or an anti-Semite. It makes them merely disrespectful. No doubt, some of the headlines have pushed the envelope and are tasteless and even offensive on Breitbart. But here's a bit of information for all those anti-Breitbarters, and they should know this. Andrew Breitbart came up with the idea to create the news website while on a visit to Israel in 2007. He wanted to create an unabashedly pro-Israel new news forum. He wanted a forum that promoted pro-American points of view that supported Israel against the sea of media enemies. There is no way then, and there is no way now, that this mission should be misconstrued as anti-Semitic. Remember, when we abuse the Holocaust, Hitler and his Nazi movement win. True haters of Israel do exist, and they need not be Nazis, like Hezbollah. On that front, it's common knowledge for over a year now that Hezbollah has amassed over 160,000 rockets, at least according to Wikipedia. Quoting from the sources in the BBC report and the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Wikipedia lists the rockets by number and by type. Boosting that claim, the Arabic press has been covering with pictures the Hezbollah military. And there were photos of tanks, armored personnel carriers, anti-aircraft weapons, even motorcycles for rapid response teams to maneuver fast and quick through rugged terrain. The pictures were posted on social media sites, and the posts showed a huge parade of Hezbollah weapons. Social media reported that the area was closed and only Hezbollah members were permitted to participate and gawk and proudly strut around as the arsenal passed by. This was a first. Hezbollah has never permitted pictures like this. They have always wanted their assets to be kept a highly guarded secret, and for good reason. The more that is known about Hezbollah's resources, the better prepared Israel can be to defend against them, or the greater Israel's motivation to destroy the weapon caches. According to Lebanese newspapers, the pictures were not made available to them directly by Hezbollah media, but instead were published by Hezbollah-friendly media. Now we have two questions. Why release the pictures now? Why distribute the pictures in this circuitous way? There are several answers, but first, more details about the pictures. The pictures seem to show U.S. tanks and half-tracks. Translation: heavy military equipment clearly taken from the Lebanese army, now squarely in the hands of Hezbollah. One particular paper, Al Safir, went so far as to describe the weapon buildup inside Syria on the Lebanese border very close to Israel. According to the paper, this is the first such buildup outside Lebanon. That, the paper points out, is a very strong message to ISIS and to other terrorists and to Israel. Quote, any future campaign will not be limited to Lebanese territory, a firm message to Israel and the terrorists, unquote. It's now obvious that the information we had a year ago about Hezbollah creating an armored division is absolutely correct. From the pictures, it looks like they have T-72 tanks, M113 armored personnel carriers. There are also pictures of European-made military-grade all-terrain vehicles. Mounted on the ATVs are Cornet anti-tank missiles. In addition, they have KS-12A anti-aircraft weapons, light tanks, and 4x4 vehicles. Hezbollah can now be proud and characterize themselves as a hybrid army. A hybrid army is a technical term which means that, on the one hand, they can fight among civilians and hide like terrorists, while on the other hand, they can muster an official fighting force with an extensive artillery and armored corps. Back to the question of why. The most important reason Hezbollah has been letting the world in on their dirty little secret of amassed weaponry is to offer confirmation to two important constituencies: their clientele and their enemies. That they are not a mere ragtag terror group. They are an organized, trained, and well-equipped fighting force They have varying levels of capabilities that include guerrilla warfare and conventional fighting. As to why they went the circuitous route in releasing the photos via Twitter, the answer is that it's a more organic method of communication. Social media allows you to measure the power of your message. The sender knows exactly how many eyes click on and can then determine the impact of the announcement and monitor all its ripple effects. Hezbollah is boasting. Hezbollah is no longer a group of amateurs. Hezbollah is conveying their message to the Arab Sunni world. They are there to defend Shiite honor, and that includes defending Assad and Syria. They are also telling Israel to beware. They are saying that the next full frontal encounter between Israel and Hezbollah will be very different from past encounters. Those were kerfuffles. Next will be an all-out war. Hezbollah has matured and grown. Most importantly, they are better trained and better capable of striking significant blows against Israel and the IDF, and all those whom they deem to be enemies. Top-grade weaponry in the possession of hot-headed extremists, that's a scary scenario. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. Just one column again today. This column is from the Jerusalem Post. I'll begin by saying that I'm very proud of the fact that I am a columnist for the Jerusalem Post. I joined them in June, and I see the team of columnists as exceptional, and the quality of most of the work and thought to be outstanding. From the point of view of ideas, it is the best collection of writers on these issues, period. This column is by Gil Troy. It was published on November 22, 2016. It's entitled Berniak's Anti-Semitish Bullying Shows the Anonymity of the Alt-Left. Troy is professor of history at McGill University, is the author of The Age of Clinton, America in the 1990s, published by St. Martin's Press. His next book will update Arthur Herzberg's The Zionist Idea. He lives in Jerusalem and teaches in Montreal. Another disclosure, Troy is one of my best friends. We grew up together in Young Judea and worked together for years at Young Judea's summer camp called Tel Yehuda. Troy is a pundit who always is thinking. His objective is to help the Jewish world better consider the most pressing issues of the day. His main job is that of an American presidential historian. This column shows how ugly the discussion has become when it comes to politics. We saw how people were treated when they criticized Trump. In this case, Troy suggests that Bernie Sanders' presence in the race forced Hillary to the left and caused her to lose the presidential election. Troy was lambasted with thousands of hate emails from the left, what he calls the alt-left. They were anti-Semitic and hateful. The attacks he could reprint were hair-raising. This is how he begins. Last week, I wrote in Time.com that Bernie Sanders' insurgency pushed Hillary Clinton too far left in the spring for her to recover the center in the fall. In response, I was e-bombed by vituperative, obscene, and anti-Semitic attacks. Although I had pointed to other factors explaining the outcomes too, Sanders' supporters thought I had blamed their hero for Clinton's failures. The barrage proved that leftists, not just rightists, inhabit today's Gooniverse, that decent politicians can have despicable supporters, and that our age of anonymous, drive-by political nit tweets has stirred a new anti-Semitism that seems milder, but is mainstreaming the traditional, vicious kind. It got so bad that Troy had to shut down his system so that the site would not crash. He describes the ugliness and how it is essential to disregard ugly talkbacks and feedbacks. He continues, while I usually ignore talkbacks, these insults swarmed my Twitter and email accounts. They reached such an ugly, scatological crescendo on my Facebook page that my 16-year-old whiz kid administrator temporarily blocked access after 400 attacks. Beyond many unquotable obscenities, I was called a moron, a hack, a puppet, a buffoon, a paid shill of the Clinton machine, a neoliberal sellout, a trumper, a shillbot, a sexual predator, psychophantic, stupid, lazy, out of touch, and, in one breathless post, an old, bald, wrinkly, Centrum Silver-popping adult with self-esteem issues. They went so far as to write McGill University demanding that they fire Troy. Internet muggers lash out blindly or cannibalize, weaponizing personal information posted online. Trolls use my photos or some biographical tidbit to mock how I looked and dressed, or to question my motives, as if only the sinister, stupid, or selfish could possibly disagree with them. Echoing third graders, tweeters rechristened me Guilty Roy. They called me an enormous dip and a huge retard. They said Gil looks like he's pooping in this pic. They told McGill University and Time to fire me. Others wrote that only a beanie-wearing kike, misspelled by the way, could write something so wrong and misguided, and that I should go back to Palestine. Despite the fact that I find it hilarious that the anti-Semite misspelled the notorious anti-Semitic canard, the entire exchange is scary. The attackers kept on coming. He described more. One tweeted, "Checked Wikipedia. You clearly hate Sanders because he wanted to treat Palestinians with respect. Typical pro-Israeli corporate dem." Troy is thick-skinned. He does not take it personally. He now explains his word and the title. People and the internet hide behind what they consider to be a protection of the internet itself and become anonymous. He writes, just as historians studying the French Revolution's crowds discovered that the mob's anonymity encouraged violence, the internet brings out people's inner demons, encouraging anonymous bigotry, what we could call anonymotry. And now, Troy concludes by explaining the reality and the danger of bigotry. Whatever side you may be on, he says, ultimately bigotry is bigotry, be it tweeted, retweeted, or delivered personally. This coarsening of our culture normalizes the abnormal, mainstreams hatred, detoxifies bigotry. Looking right, it helps make Donald Trump's outrageousness feel less outrageous. Looking left, it helps mainstream the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movements, constant escalation of anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism. Burrowing deeper into our own positions and demonizing the other so easily in 140 characters in graphic photos will ease us into ever harsher positions, ever more violence, ever greater polarization. Let's fight this hatred aggressively, systematically, and consistently. This is a very powerful and very unsettling moment. Gil Troy is correct. We must fight for respectful discourse on all issues and on all sides. Coming up next, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. First up is a cartoon by Yaakov Kirshen, also from the Jerusalem Post. It appeared November 16th, 2016. It depicts a city being bombed. The caption reads, "Who was bombing the Syrian city of Aleppo?" The answer at the bottom of the cartoon reads, "These days, apparently everybody." Next up is a cartoon from Special Operations Forces Report News, also known as SOFRN, by Norwood, and was published on September 30th, 2016. When all else fails, I can always find a great set of cartoons at SOFRN. Here, the Russian bear is holding Uncle Sam in a bear hug. U.S. Secretary of State is behind them, and he's saying, "Must look stern." And Gary Johnson, who is dressed as a baby, says, "What dat?" in baby speak, as he points to a bombed-out city with the sign that reads Aleppo. The fact is that the United States is stuck in a quagmire called Syria and being held hostage by Russia. The last cartoon is also by Norwood and from the SOFRN. It's dated September 26, 2016. The cartoon is actually entitled News. The U.S. distrusts Saudi Arabia with good reason, and it compares ISIS and Saudi Arabia. On one side, under ISIS, the list reads, United States enemy, authoritarian, fundamentalist, oppresses women and minorities, death on human rights, uses corporal punishment, regularly tortures people, regularly beheads people. And on the other side, under the Saudi Arabia, it reads U.S. ally, and then lists exactly the same things. Authoritarian, fundamentalist, oppresses women and minorities, death on human rights, uses corporal punishment, regularly tortures people, regularly beheads people. And then there are two pics, one in white and one in black, both holding a machine gun. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. The U.S. is exporting natural gas from shale to the Middle East. 2 shipments of liquefied natural gas went to Kuwait, 1 to the United Arab Emirates, 2 to Jordan. This is mind-boggling. Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates together hold 40% of the world's natural gas reserves. They have more than 100 years of natural gas reserves. So why are they importing U.S. natural gas? The answer is that they have a shortage of usable natural gas right now. How's that? Here's how. They have a heavily subsidized gas system and fixed prices and have huge amounts of wasted energy. Prices are so low and demand is crazy high, so they need much more. Their gas is sour, which means it has to be purified. It contains far too much hydrogen sulfide. That is expensive. It's hard to purify it. And it's way above the price being charged per BTU, British thermal unit, in these gas-rich Middle East countries. That's why they are getting cleaner gas from the United States. And that makes sense, even if it is counterintuitive. There's a significant movement rising up against the Palestinian leadership and the Palestinian Authority. The movement includes violent armed conflicts and shootouts with PA security police pitted against armed local villages in towns like Balata. Balata is a refugee camp just outside of Shechem, also known as Nablus. What makes the current internal conflict different from previous conflicts is that this time, those fighting the establishment are not from Hamas. They are true blue Fatah supporters and have always been. They are people who have gotten to the point where they can no longer tolerate Palestinian corruption. They are supporters of Mohammed Dahlan. Dahlan is in exile, living in Abu Dhabi. Once upon a time, he was one of Arafat's fair-haired boys. He was the strong-arm power of the PA in Gaza. Abbas and Dahlan came into a conflict when Dahlan accused Abbas's 2 sons of corruption by using their power to amass a personal financial success and billions. Dahlan was then convicted in absentia in the Palestinian court. He was convicted of corruption and besmirching the name of the president. The corruption is just one element of the discontent resulting in these armed conflicts. Palestinians are rejecting Palestinian leadership because they have come to the full realization that there is no hope for change in the leadership in the Palestinian Authority. People are discouraged. Jobs are given only to insiders and to insiders' families. The situation is getting so bad that shootouts themselves have claimed the lives of at least 12 people and resulted in the wounding of dozens of others. 2 assassination attempts against Egyptian President al-Sisi were just foiled by Egypt's police. The assassins were members of ISIS. Egypt is experiencing very difficult economic and social tensions. Al-Sisi is working hard at keeping terrorists at bay, but it is a difficult battle. One of the assassination plots was to be carried out at the Clock Tower Hotel in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, during the president's pilgrimage to the Hajj. The plan was for the wife of the plot organizer to put on a suicide belt and blow herself up. The suicide bomb was intended to serve as a distraction for al-Sisi's guards, and he would be killed at that moment. At the same time, al-Sisi was being murdered, the ISIS plotters planned to assassinate the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed ibn Nayef. Egyptian police also uncovered the second ISIS plot. They called the plotters the bearded police, and they have been arrested and charged. Assassination is a commonly used weapon in the Middle East. ISIS is exploiting those who are loyal to the cause, and many of whom work inside mainstream professions, and getting them to hand over information and facilitate access to targets. That is exactly what happened in Mecca and in Egypt. A new wave of terror has hit Israel. Terrorists have struck at the heart of every single Israeli. This new form of terror is lighting fires and then letting the wind and dry conditions take it from there. Over 100,000 people were evacuated from their homes. Israeli education stresses the beauty and the importance of nature and the value of land, especially the land of Israel. Even those whose homes have not been threatened, or those who live outside the danger zone are in pain about the loss and the damage. But why would terrorists destroy the very same land that they want and claim to love? Because Palestinian terrorists gladly cut off their own arms when it results in Israelis losing a finger. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that one of the most anti-Semitic words that can be used is the word kike? It is of unknown origin. It comes into play and first seen in 1900. There are two reasonable explanations of the derivation of the term. The first comes from Leo Rostin, who explains that when Jews arrived in Ellis Island and other points of entry into the United States, they could not sign their name, but they were adverse to using the X as a signature because it was too similar to the cross. They would not use the X itself. Just like in Israel, by the way, they do not use the plus sign in mathematics. They use an upside-down T, capital T. Jewish immigrants coming to the United States signed using a circle. Circle in Yiddish and in German is keikel. It was shortened to kike. That's Rostin's explanation. Another explanation comes from Stephen Birmingham in Our Crowd. He suggests that the German Jews named Eastern European Jews kike because many Russian names had the chi sound in them. We see the term written in Jewish reports and even in Jewish Federation and Charity reports. We see it in German and in English from the period. Established Jews in America referring to immigrant greener Jews as kikes. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.